Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to The Element Podcast.
I don't know why, there's a butterfly feeling like someone kicked me in my side, yeah. I don't know why, but when you come around, I can't talk to you, so you pass me by. The way you smile, big brown eyes, girl, you just lock me up.
What's happening, All My Woods people? It is starting to feel a little bit better around here, KC. It's a little bit humid, but not as bad. A little bit hot, but not as bad. I think we're getting into something here.
Man, I think we're getting into fall. I think it's happening. Yeah.
Scary to say that around here.
I went out and did my first run since our elk hunt. I didn't even run a full mile, but it was just kind of like a get back into just like that feel, and it was tough, man. Like my legs still aren't completely recovered, and I've still got a bunch of numbness in my feet.
It's weird,
which is a weird thing, but. Can you believe it's only been a week since we got back?
It feels like a decade.
I know.
Like, it's been so busy, man, and I have not run. I have not worked out. My wife keeps asking me over and over again, hey, you want to work out today? And I'm like, I think I'll just rest and edit a little bit. And I honestly, because I did, I think I talked about this already, but I played a few shows after we got home, and there was no time for like recovery. It was like, hey, go from getting up for 10 or 11 days straight, like, 4 or 5 o'clock, to now let's stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and play shows, and it was just like hectic when I got back, I guess you could say, and didn't get much sleep. So I'm still kind of in recovery mode, but I finally got to look at the weather today, which was a good thing because I haven't even been able to do that. Had an anniversary date last night, so that was good.
Where'd y'all go?
We went to Ben 303.
Oh, that's your favorite.
Dude, the shrimp and grits. It's the best dish I've ever had, man. Best thing I've ever had. It's the bomb. So don't go there, people, because I don't want you to make me have to wait in line. But anyway, it's great. Yeah. So, yeah, man, we've got a big buck killer, like historical big buck killer on the podcast today, Terry Drury. I'm sure if you've read anything or if you can read, you know that by now. But you went deer hunting here locally pretty recently, and had a kind of visitor that ruined your hunt a little bit. I guess you could say ruined. I don't know if maybe I'm saying that wrong.
Well, it's a very strange concept, which I always go out wanting to shoot deer. Right, yeah. And end up having a big boar hog come in real close, and I shot him on the ground, and I could see his teeth like from sitting there. So it's I'm not really very hog scared, but it was just kind of like, look at you,
yeah,
And he like knew I was there, but wanted the corn worse. It was kind of one of those weird situations, and I ended up shooting him, and actually got pretty good video of that, which is that'll be coming out soon after we wrap up the Gila series, but it was a very large contrast to the night before whenever I went deer hunting on public land and saw another big boar and completely just messed everything up and didn't get footage of it or anything. But on that trip, I did get to pull a trail camera card that's going to be essential for our plan for this upcoming cold front, of which you referred to when you looked at the weather earlier.
Yeah. So it seems the trail cameras just give us confidence to know that there are shooters in the area, and we've talked about that several times. It's not necessarily, and you made a good point this morning, it's not necessarily that we need to hunt deer that are using that trail camera, the pattern that we hung that trail camera for, especially because these we had the hottest September on record from what I understand.
Which is strange.
I know. And so like deer that were going to water may not be going to water during the cold front anymore. So we're looking at more of the Shumard oak pattern and that kind of thing. But I definitely am interested in hearing what Terry has to say about October game planning and how to make things come together during like the pre-rut stages. So maybe we can get to him and then come back at the end and talk about our game plan for the week. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. Real quick though, just so you know, the last regular episode we have, I think it's 135. Is that right?
I forgot to look it up, but yeah, it's something like that.
Okay, so the Gila recap of the Element podcast, we announced the winners.
Yeah, 135.
Episode 135, the winners of our big giveaway that we had for iTunes reviews. And we've had a few people claim their prizes, but the big prize of the Vortex 10x42 binoculars has not been claimed yet. Yeah. So if you're one of those people who left a review, thank you so much. Go and listen to that episode and claim your binoculars, because if not, they very well might get used this season. So get after it.
Used or
not
sold, you know what I mean?
Exactly. We need gas. So go over there and listen to that and make sure you claim those binoculars, and then we can get that all settled and we can all get to deer hunting together.
Yep, that's right. All right, let's get to Terry. All right, so now on the phone we have Terry Drury. He's an old guy that's still hanging around. What's happening, man?
Hey, not much. Just battling the heat. I can't complain up here because I know you guys have got it much worse down in Texas.
Yeah, maybe. Sometimes I know it can get pretty hot up there for sure, but we did have plenty of 100-degree days in the last few weeks especially. So, it's been rough, man. That weather for you guys up there, I guess coupled with a lot of early rains, has kind of made for a disastrous thing going on up there, I guess, huh?
Well, what we thought was going to turn out really, really nice, and we had some timely rains pretty early on for food plots and what have you. And we had a really mild August and a fairly mild July. We had a few warm days in there, but not too terribly bad. And here we are in September, and it's been absolutely brutal. So a lot of those new growths, particularly we plant a lot of biologic, and it's predominantly a moisture-driven plant when it comes up and germinates. And when you get these extreme temperatures and really dry conditions, it just shrivels up, and you're already thinking about replanting. So timely rains early for, some of those big destination food plots that we had planted, like soybeans and corn. But then as you get into the latter months and you start with the fall plantings, then you kind of got to worry a little bit. But our season just seemed to be semi upside down here the last few years. The springs and the falls just aren't what they once were when we were much younger. So I don't know. The whole world is kind of upside down. With that said, typically on an extremely dry or drought season, dry summer, your concerns are about EHD hitting, epizootic hemorrhagic disease. And, because all of those velvet bucks kind of gather in, kind of tight, cool places, whether it be inside of a small pond or the backside of a small levee or in a creek bank or whatever it may be, oftentimes they get bombarded with the midge because that's where their larvae hatch. Mm-hmm. Well, this year we had the timely rains and a tremendous amount of flooding on the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, and every one of the tributaries that feed those rivers. And they were up for many, many months. So you would think on a really extremely wet year, you wouldn't be bombarded with the midge. Well, we were incorrect. As those waters receded, it just ended up opening way more hatching areas for that midge and places for them to deposit their larvae. And then we had cool, damp conditions from then on, and they just seemed to flourish. Mm-hmm. So with that, the results are an extreme whitetail kill that we're seeing right now because of the EHD. It's been awful, really, really dreadful. And I'm talking a wide swath through the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Kansas. It's pretty bad this year, guys.
Man. So I guess the only way to kind of to get out of it at this point is by cold temperatures, right? I mean, even if it floods back over, are we still going to have a lot of the midges around?
I think you're absolutely correct. I think the ones that hatched are already, in the air, and it could come back up, but I don't know that it will do us any good. And you're also correct in the fact that we need some extreme bitter cold temperatures, and it can't get here soon enough to suit us.
Yeah,
truly.
I understand that. What time of year you usually guys get that in that northern Missouri, Iowa area?
You're talking about cold temps?
Yes, sir.
Boy, sometimes we're, mid to latter part of October anymore. Years ago, we could experience some cool temperature in September, but anymore, it just seems like we're warm all the way through October. There's years where I don't put a jacket on until, first week in November. It stays so mild. You might wear a long sleeve shirt, but we're just experiencing a lot warmer temps than what we used to have years ago.
Yeah. Well, we understand that. I mean, football season's usually over by the time we're wearing jackets down here. So
I couldn't imagine playing football full pads in some of those southern areas. I just couldn't. Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas. Tough.
Oh, yeah. I did it for a long time, actually. I played high school football in Texas, and I played college football in Texas, and so I dealt with a lot of those steep temperatures. And we always had dark blue helmet on every team I was on, so it was like it cooked your head like an oven, So it was pretty brutal, man. But maybe it made me tougher in the long run. So
you got to be tough. Our hats off to you. We're a couple of sissies, Mark and I. Man, our radiators are built for freezing cold temperature. It seriously does not get cold enough to suit me. Well, it really doesn't. Yes. I love the cold weather, and we're just not built for those warmer temps.
You guys are a different breed, because KC and I will be up in the tree just barely hanging in there when it starts getting cold. So I guess you have the advantage during deer season, so that's a good thing.
Well, and I'll be honest, the way some of the garments nowadays, the way they develop clothing is so much better and just a little more cold resistant than what it was many years ago. So
sure thing.
We're fortunate in that respect with base layers and what have you.
Yeah. Well, other than the EHD, how have things been this summer? You been able to tie all the loose ends together yet?
Well, I touched on it earlier. We've had some timely rains, and on my farm, the deer density is so high that we always battle browse pressure, and I can't seem to get crops to grow because they eat them down so quickly, because the rainfall has to outrun the browse. And this year we've had those timely rains, and we've got food all over the place, but the deer are dying at a pretty rapid pace. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for us. Although the food plots look great and we've got a pretty decent mass crop with the acorns, the number of deer are extremely low. The deer density is really taking a hit. There's areas in southern Iowa, northern Missouri, southern Iowa particularly, and we got this information from the conservation department, that they're estimating there's a 12-mile by 12-mile swath that had somewhere between a 95 and a 100% deer kill because of the EHD going through.
Oh, that's just crazy, man. I've got some buddies, or a buddy in particular, that he's actually been on the podcast. He lives up in Iowa, and his particular farm, I think, is going to be in one of those areas where he said it's devastating. It's absolutely just destroyed everything they had. So pretty sad if your kind of life is built around deer hunting,
Yeah. Yes, it makes your livelihood extremely scary.
Yeah.
And, we talk to a lot of different people. The age of social media and digital media, you guys are very familiar with it, that things now travel like wildfire. So you hear more about it than we did years ago. And, we stay in touch with Dahana Candy Kiske and Lee and Tiffany Lakoski and, just a number of people that, have built their businesses in that area. And they're all experiencing some of the same things. I think Kiske found his number one shooter, found it dead. So, and there's neighbors and just friends in general. We're hearing an awful lot of people finding deer dead, and not just one or two. It's, in the double digits on almost every occurrence or every situation that we're hearing. So it's really, really bad this year. 12 was bad, and then 13 followed it up with a little touch of it. But this year it seems to be much worse.
Oh, no.
That's not good.
Well, y'all have rebuilt once and have done well, for, I guess, rebuilt's the best word, but managed your herd back to a decent spot. What have you learned, from that 2012 and 13 episode that's going to kind of help you, or maybe even things that you've already prepared for another outbreak like this?
Well, as sad as it may sound, if you do get one that you've got pictures of this year, and this year our strategy is going to change a little bit where we're going to stay on top of the cameras even more so than normal. But if you get pictures of one and he hasn't been bit and he hasn't been expired, and there's a few other ones running around, you're gonna mash in on him and try and take advantage of it and see if you can't connect. With that said, if it wipes out the entire upper class like it has in years past, then you're forced kind of to wait 2 or 3 years. You're going to continue providing food, and they do come back pretty strong and what seems to be a little healthier than before. And I say that maybe because of the ones that do survive have built an immune system from button bucks on, and only the strong survive would apply here. So it's a double-edged sword, and we hate it. It's a really, really horrid, tragic expiration for a whitetail. We've watched it firsthand with our eyes, and it's no way for them to expire. I'll tell you that, they literally burn up from the inside. The temperature and their internal temperature just absolutely is off the chart. So they all head to water trying to get a drink. Some of them you'll see with their head underwater or head down in the water, and they just can't get cooled down. And some of them within 24 to 48 hours are dead. So there's an acute and a chronic, and the acute happens very, very quickly. The chronic lasts much longer. We'll still see deer dying in November and December this year.
Man, that's just terrible. Yeah. And it's just, I guess you just got to come and face the facts, that it's going to happen. And you were talking about, kind of how it changes your strategy and how you have to get aggressive on it. If you got a target buck that's still alive, you have to go in there and get after him. And it's a weird way to transition into this, but the way that what we wanted to talk about with you today was pre-rut tactics. And, that's going to be trying to take a big buck in October, and that's kind of what you have to do, if you're racing against the clock like that, right? So, you mentioned trail cameras as being one of the big things that you're going to use to try to move in and be aggressive on a big buck. How does that play out in October when you're trying to do that?
Well, I'll kind of take this to a little bit of a normal application, because there are a lot of guys, and if this is random in certain spots and EHD is not in certain areas, then obviously those guys may have a tremendous season.
Yeah.
So with that being said, a typical October, we're going to be really looking at those cameras, and then I do a lot of triangulation. And part of it is being extremely familiar with your parcel or your dirt that you're hunting, knowing, kind of where they bed, where they feed, and where they're going to travel to, where the does bed and where they feed, where they might intercept them those first few times whenever those does are just starting to, or ahead of when they're just starting to come into estrus. So a lot of those bucks will hit those green fields. And this year, I think we wax full on the 13th or 14th. So we would typically be sitting a green field, a clover, a non-typical clover field or something. During that period, you've got a rising moon, and we would be extremely, extremely diligent in being on those green fields during that period. I would prefer that the moon be rising a little bit later in the month, in and around that 27th, 28th, 29th, because that Halloween period is always so good, but it doesn't time out again this year. It seems like those windows are very small as well. We really struggle trying to get a full moon that's rising and waxing full in around the end of that October period. But with that said, we're still, if you hunt it on a normal year, this year around the middle of October there, and it's a short window, and you've got to have the right temperatures, but you'll go out there some days and see that big buck standing there, and you wonder what he's doing on his feet during daylight hours at 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon. Well, those applications are when that happens, whenever that moon is rising in the afternoon and puts them up on their feet. Cool temperatures, really dictates that, and it does enhance that quite a bit during daylight.
Sure. So in regards to the cameras, do you ever set a camera and start kind of creating a pattern with a certain buck and go, I'm not exactly sure if he's bedding over here, and so you back down the trail however many yards and kind of backtrack for a while until you're a little more certain, or you just make an assumption and then start hunting?
Well, when you start getting daylight pictures of a buck, pretty good chance he's bedded pretty doggone close. If you're getting all nocturnal pictures, all nighttime pictures, pretty good chance he's traveling a ways to get there. So you can bet your booty, if you get some morning trail camera photos of a deer, 7:15, 7:30 in the morning during daylight, chances are he's bedded really, really close to that particular camera. And that's one way to start the process of triangulation. Say, okay, he's bedding here, but he may be ending up over here, at nighttime at 10:30, 11 o'clock, you get his picture. So you got an idea where he was bedded and then where he's going to. And you can play the game of interception. But I always look at those morning pictures during daylight, and this time of year particularly, pretty good chance he's bedded very, very close to that area.
So on that note, if you have a buck that you're getting, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night or 4 or 5 in the morning, well into dark, and then he fairly quickly transitions into being more of a daylight mover, do you think that that's because he was roaming more and he's more active in the daylight, or has he adjusted his bedding and now he is bedding closer to where your camera placement is than what he was before?
I think it's moon dependent and temperature dependent. I think if you get a temperature differential, let's say of 30 or 40 degrees, if your average temperature is 60 and all of a sudden it drops down to the low 50s or high 40s, then you got to be thinking, okay, I got a real big temperature differential here. And whether you have a setting moon in the morning or a rising moon in the afternoon, it will tell you whether or not they're going to move during that evening period a little earlier, or if they're going to be a little bit later getting back to bed in the morning. And that's the way we look at it. His range may have not changed. It may just have changed the time of day in which he's moving.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yes,
and
sir.
Early season obviously is different. When you start getting into October or end of October particularly, those core areas do start to expand. But it's usually a little bit later for us. And I know Texas, your peak estrus is probably substantially different than ours. I'm going to say at least 2 or 3 weeks, maybe more.
It depends on where you're at. Where we're at is northeast, so we're not in the brush country or anything.
Okay.
So yeah,
right.
it's usually in November. It's pretty. I think it's going to be. We see most of our movement in that mid-November window, where that might be kind of a lockdown for some of the Midwest or whatever you want to call it, where they're actually breeding. So. But yeah, it's similar here. We have several different.
I think there's 7 different ruts in Texas, if I remember right. I used to live down on the Texas coast, and like on the upper Texas coast, your rut was in late September. So deer season completely missed the rut. It's a crazy anomaly, right? And then you head to north central Texas. It's much like the Midwest. You head south, it can be in late December, early January. It just really depends. Texas is so big, and y'all hunt in Texas, you know how it is. It's almost like it's the same. You do have a rut, but it's just it seems to be a wider bell curve in some places. So it's
and that's kind of the best of all worlds in all reality, because we like catching them before they get with a doe. Once they get with those does, it's really tough to find a big deer and get on him and stay on him. So we love that period just prior to. So if when those regions are popping, particularly that estrus cycle, then you could really do a little bit of bopping around and take advantage of it throughout the entire state.
Yeah, no doubt. It's fun for sure, and just even like locally here, like I said, it may be mid-November, but I mean I've got pictures on trail cameras of deer nosing does around in February, and so it kind of gives you a pretty big window to still lock into. I mean I remember on New Year's Day last year I had a buck come through chasing 2 does, and I mean it happens. So it kind of gives you hope anytime you step into a stand that things could get wild, So
absolutely
pretty fun. But
absolutely,
you mentioned earlier that the mast crop is looking pretty good in your neck of the woods, which it is in ours too. I guess kind of my first question in regards to that is, what time of year are you seeing deer kind of lock into the white oaks when they start dropping?
Well, in the Midwestern area there that I'm hunting in, and there in really some of the surrounding areas, there's a lot of big destination feed fields. And this year we were extremely wet early, so much of those crops got planted later. So the soybeans are still fairly green in spots, and the corn hasn't matured yet. So until those big destination feed fields, until the beans are cut and the corn is shelled, a lot of times the timber doesn't light up. The acorns may be laying on the ground and the squirrels are gobbling them up, but the whitetails haven't hit them yet. It depends how big of the patch. Sometimes if it's a small patch of timber that's between some destination feed fields, you'll see them in there milling around during the middle of the day in the shade. But some of those bigger blocks where they're big destination feed fields, and big blocks of timber, it may take a while this year. And we looked at it and say, normally our farms light up, or mine, particularly the middle of October, it's just all like a light switch. It changes overnight because many of the crops get cut and get taken out.
Mm-hmm.
So then all of a sudden, all those deer pour into the timber. This year, we're expecting that to be a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Although we've had the warm temperatures here of late, so things are starting to change pretty quickly. We're starting to see some beans starting to turn yellow. Some of the guys went in and cut corn for silage this year a little bit early. So, you know, if they get them out on a normal year, by the middle of October, things really change.
Gotcha. So if you have a kind of a big flat of white oaks maybe on your property, how do you narrow down to that one tree that you need to be sitting in?
Well, we're going to play wind direction, obviously, and access, kind of two of the big keys. Access, number one, if you can get in there without boogering them. So, you know, you'd obviously want to go in there in the dark. If it's a big flat where you can see from one side to the other, well, that's tough. You kind of want to cut your trail and have it ready to slide in there and not make any noise. We'll clean those trails with a blower or a rake or something and make sure they're clean. And then, if with that said, we're going to slip in there in the dark and might sit there all day until the time's right.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever call much in October? You ever do any calling?
Yeah, I do, but I'm real selective about when I do, and I usually wait till a little bit later, and I'll do very little blind calling, but I'll wait till I make a visual, and I also wait until I know that I got the wind on him to where he cannot get downwind of me. Mm-hmm. So that's usually pretty important for us. Some guys, you see guys that have had tremendous amount of luck. You know, I mentioned Don Kiske and Jay Gregory, a few of the guys earlier that are kings of calling. Kiski's rattled in a bunch of big deer over the years, and so has Jay, and so has Lee. Mm-hmm. So, but we've never spent a tremendous number of times in the woods and just done a lot of blind calling. Mm-hmm. So we're pretty careful about how much we do. I don't want them to know where I'm at, number one.
Yeah.
So I make doggone sure that I got the wind right before I'll call out them. And right. I have always had good luck. I've rattled in some good bucks and killed good deer, but I'm just real apprehensive about educating them.
Yeah. So at what point in October? You said later. Does it depend on the moon and the cold temps to kind of get them into just a more ruddy feeling, I guess, or how does that work for you?
Well, from a visual standpoint, I like watching that body posture, and whenever they start coming out onto a food plot and they think they're the Mac Daddy. And you start seeing the hair bristle up and they start challenging other small bucks, and it's time to start. And we're not afraid to use decoys as well. I would do those kind of simultaneously, but it's a short window when that works. And it's usually around the end of October or the first few days in November. And I like to go by what the deer is telling me. And everyone's got a little bit different personality. They're not too indifferent from a human in that respect. Some are fighters and some are lovers. Mm-hmm. You know, the lovers like to go the other way, and the fighters come running, tromping right on in there.
Yep.
Yeah. So around that time of year, you're starting to see a switch in deer behavior and activity and that sort of thing. And the sign kind of starts to change as well. You end up having new scrapes and new rubs pop up in all kinds of different places. Which one of those are you going to key in on more? Which one's going to mean more to you?
I really look at scrapes. I years ago, we put a lot of faith in rubs, but they're semi-hard to read at times because there's so doggone many deer hitting them. Mm-hmm. And we'll put a camera on a rub, and you may see every buck on your farm hitting that rub. Now, what it can tell you is how long he's at that rub, meaning an older, mature deer might stand at that spot for 10 or 15 minutes before he goes to the next one. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that over the years where you can do that triangulation that I talked about early on and say, you know what, he was here for 15 or 20 minutes. He'd rub a little bit, and then he stood there, and then he rubbed a little bit, and he just looked around. We see that quite often with an older, mature buck, a 7.5, 8.5, 9.5-year-old deer. The younger deer will rub it a little bit, and then they move to the next one. Mm-hmm. So rubs can help you in that respect. Scrapes, on the other hand, will tell you that's the whole, really, in a nutshell, when it comes to the breeding cycle. The does are going to go there, they're going to do their thing, and then the bucks are going to follow. And there's a lot of messaging going on there that we're not all 100% certain as to what they're saying, mm-hmm. but that's how they pick up those first available estrus does or through those scrapes. So I put a lot more stock in a scrape than I do in a rub per se.
Yeah. So on that note, we go to the Midwest and hunt and stuff, and for some reason, when you see a scrape that's the size of a truck hood, it just gets you going, right? Can you
Absolutely.
does that really mean that much, though, like the size of the scrape? Does that mean something to you?
Some of those can be a core scrape or a hub scrape, where every single deer in that block of timber is going to go to that particular. It's a wagon wheel or a wagon spoke effect, where they're coming from all directions to get to that big primary scrape. And absolutely, yes, when you find one, you've hit the mother lode. It's not, that's one you want to park over the top of, say, 20 yards away, knowing that you've got good access and where you're going to, what wind direction you're going to hunt it on, because you're obviously going to give up a downwind side. So you're going to say, okay, flip a coin here. What's the best side I want to give up? Mm-hmm. And but I would definitely hunt something like that. If you find a big hub scrape like that, 100%. During the first 10 days of November, I'd hunt that in the morning, every morning, provided you can get the right winds for it, and you will kill a deer on one.
I like that confidence. That feels nice. Now, would you walk past many, pie plate size scrapes to go find a scrape like that?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be looking for a scrape per se, but I walk past a lot of pie-shaped scrapes because so many young deer do those, especially on field edges. 1 year and a half old buck might make 10 of those, and hit them all in one morning. So we disregard some of those, but a camera will tell you, what you're looking at. And a 1 out of 10, there might be number 4, might have a big Mugambi giant go hit it. So, you want to kind of make sure that you take the inventory and be diligent about studying who's visiting those scrapes. Mm-hmm. But we do walk past a lot of the smaller ones.
I'm going to have to use that term because I'm usually more of like it's a toad, and I think that's just so elementary compared to what you just said. Yes. I like that a lot, man. I like it.
We don't see or hear near enough of those.
That's right, man. So during that early season window, the month of October, what are some of the things that can change a buck's behavior? I know you mentioned crops. In your country, it seems like crops are, almost everything depends on crops, and that's different for us because we just don't really have crops. We have our ag is, hay production, Bermuda type stuff, and cattle. So, just kind of in general, what are some of the other things that might change a buck's behavior during the month of October?
Well, with that hay and those crop fields that you're talking about, obviously a lot of those fields, when they hay them, there's some new undergrowth comes up through there. And whether it's, alfalfa or there's a little bit of clover in there mixed in, those can be deadly early season because we definitely like to park on top of green during those early days in October because they just can't get enough of it hardly. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't overlook those if you've got a lot of them. And I know in your area, they're probably vast, where it might be hundreds of acres. Mm-hmm. So you really have to be kind of studying from afar and maybe do a little bit of glassing and figure out where they're popping out at. It may be a little cove in the back of a field. It may be structure. There might be a creek or a ditch or some reason that they're popping out there. So you can learn a lot, and I certainly wouldn't overlook those areas. Mm-hmm. With that said, if you're in an area where you don't have the food source, then I would really look at temperature differential and moon phase. In the evenings, you want to be hunting that on a rising moon when it coincides with their normal feeding pattern. So if you're driving home from work one evening and you see the moon already up, at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, you're like, oh, doggone, that moon's up early this evening. You really want to key in on those moon times because it does trigger them to get up on their feet and move during daylight hours. You couple that with temperature differential, and all of a sudden you've got a big mass movement where you see a lot of deer up on their feet. And those windows are so short, it may only be an evening or two where you've got optimum conditions. And those little periods are the ones that you want to try and key in on. Are you guys familiar with DeerCast, or have you?
Yes. Yeah. We actually had Mark on last year, and he had, I think it was right before maybe it came out, but he had discussed it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we feel like we have, really unlocked the code, and this has been many, many years of observation and really a lot of effort between he and I, where we were comparing notes on a daily basis for decades. and saying, did your deer move? Okay, no. Did your deer? Yes, mine did move. Why? Why did they move? And then we'd go down through a litany of different, weather effects that we had and saying, here's what my weather conditions were and here's why they moved, coupled with moon. So we took all of that and put it all together and had a company in St. Louis create an algorithm. We have 13 influencers that went into this algorithm. And those influencers have been pretty doggone accurate as predicting whitetail movement for mature deer during daylight hours. And that's the key word, or the operative word, is saying when mature deer are more likely to move during daylight hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a neat thing for sure. I guess here's a question that comes from an experience I recently had. I went up and hunted in Nebraska, and the deer were bedding in milo a lot. And it was really tall.
Was it this year?
This was this year. This was last week.
Oh, okay.
And
all right.
They also, I think, were bedding in corn. I really couldn't see them, and I didn't hunt real close to a lot of corn, even though there was a lot in the area. So, for you guys, it would probably be more corn. What do you do about deer that are kind of bedding in corn and they really have just nowhere they need to go? It's standing corn, It's bedding, it's food, it's everything. How do you hunt a deer like that?
Well, you either go to a bar or a restaurant and you sit there and enjoy the day. Because it's really tough to get them out of there. And that's what I was saying early on, that until they shell those cornfields and cut the beans, and the other scenario would be the milo, you can't hardly get them out of there. You just can't beat them out. And the last thing you want to do is go push them out or nudge them out. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty tough. The only thing that might bring them out is that moon phase and cool temperatures. Mm-hmm. And if you're not dealing with that, you're sitting there almost with your, up against a rock and a hard place. That's really a tough predicament to overcome. Mm-hmm. So DeerCast helps with that a little bit, because it will give you optimum conditions when a whitetail is more likely to be up on their feet during daylight hours. So you can look at DeerCast, and if it says great, then by golly, there's a pretty good chance, even though they've got everything they want, they're still going to get up on their feet and move around a little bit. Yeah. But it's all of those elements, combined into one, and it's optimum conditions for all the above.
That's going to be an efficient way to use your days in October, your kitchen passes, I guess. So
100%. The only detriment this year is if you got hit with EHD and they're not there. We experienced it last year in Fulton County, Illinois. Even though it was random, we were in a pocket over there where it was about between a 90 and a 95% deer kill. And we sat on some beautiful, beautiful timber and big destination feed fields and food plots and some of the finest hunting Illinois has to offer. And we'd see 1 or 2, 3 was like a big day. Mm-hmm. It was really, really bad.
Yep, sounds like it.
So no matter what DeerCast says, if they're not there, they're not there. And I started smelling those deer in July. I think I got my first whiff of a dead deer when I was changing flashcards. Mm-hmm. And they just continued to die. So therefore, and it was, the brush and understory is all 6 foot tall. You couldn't walk through it or find dead deer, but you could smell them. Mm-hmm. So shed season this past spring, one of my farm managers, he found 10 or 11 dead bucks in about an hour and a half. They just were all dead.
Mm. Man, that's terrible.
So that's Mother Nature humbling us every day.
Yeah, sure, no kidding. And it will definitely happen every season in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So, you're talking a lot about these 13 variables that you have, with like the DeerCast system that you're using and whatnot. The ones that pop out and that everybody, I think, takes into consideration are time of day, temperature, cold fronts, that sort of thing, and then the moon thing, which is something that I've heard you and Mark as well talk a lot about, is the moon phases. Do you ever run into a situation where, none of those 3 are popping, but all the other, maybe less important things all line up right to where, it's a warm day and you got deer movement at 1 p.m. in the afternoon? Do you see that?
Well, a lot of times barometric pressure is involved in that too. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a barometer that's off the charts and some of the other influencers aren't as prevalent, and that's the whole idea of the algorithm. And it took us 3 years to tweak that thing. We made it to where we felt like what we were observing was about as natural a movement as you could possibly observe. And we continued adjusting those influencers either to the positive or to the negative. Some we slid up, some we slid down, and felt as though we've got this thing about as close as you can get it, to be quite honest. So yes, every once in a while you'll see 2 or 3 of those influencers that, are pretty prevalent, but yet the other ones are not. And you don't get a great, you don't even get a good, you might get a fair or even just a poor. It takes all of those elements for it to say great. There's a reason. All those elements line up. It's like getting the stars to line up. And when it says great, that barometer and departure from normal temperature and wind speed and all those other things and moon phase are all on the upside.
Mm-hmm. Man, I really appreciate the tactics, and it's going to help a lot of people in October, I think, and especially me, and especially if I get to go up to your part of the country. So hopefully EHD will leave a few deer for me. But I kind of want to hit on a few things real quick in the end here that are a little bit different. But you and your brother Mark are big influencers and you've been doing this a long time. So I think a question that probably a lot of people would have is, they think you got a cake job, but what's the worst thing you guys deal with in your line of work?
Well, it started so long ago. This is our 30th year of doing this, and we've seen so many changes throughout the year just in technology. Being able to, adjust on the fly and being willing to transition. And right now, we're looking at digital media and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and all those podcasts, just like what you guys are doing. That wasn't around just not too many years ago. 5 years ago, we couldn't convince anybody that this would be like this. We were trying to, it was crazy. We'd sit in on meetings with several of our partners who are the best in the business. And a lot of those, even the ad agencies, they just wouldn't hear it. And we were saying, hey, it's coming. And sure enough, here we are 5 years later. So with that being said, I think one of the toughest things was, and it wasn't hard for Mark and I, but it's hard for people to accept it. The general hunting community sometimes has a hard time adjusting. When we went from a VHS tape to a DVD, was like the wheels fell off the bus. There were a lot of guys buying both because they didn't believe that, number one, the DVDs would be around very long, and they didn't know how to use it. So they'd buy and order a VHS tape, and then they'd order a DVD. So those changes have been really, really monumental here in the last, or over a period of 3 decades, in 30 years. And fortunately, we've got a lot of good friends in this industry, at Mossy Oak and PSE and several of them that we've been with for a long, long time. And we enjoy doing what we do. Being home or away from home and away from the family, that was a long adjustment as well, more so for the family than it was for us, because it's just hard. But, everybody made sacrifices, and here we are 30 years later, and we're so blessed. We really are. We're some of the most, blessed people on earth. But there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into it over the years, hanging stands and, fisticuffs and arguing as to where we were going to sit and who was hunting, and we went through all that stuff,
Yeah, for sure. So what's is the future bright, I guess, is my question, because, I think personally, you've seen the kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but just the anti-gun movement with YouTube, and YouTube is such a huge platform for a lot of these guys these days, and these different teams that are doing this thing. And so, what does the long term look like as far as YouTube goes? Because it's going to be hard for us just to start some kind of hunting, video channel that is actually successful, because you're relying on masses when it comes to fractions of cents per view. So how does it all look to you, I guess, coming up in the future, the next 5 years or so?
Well, if we see another change in the next 5, like we did in the last 5, it too will be monumental, and Lord only knows where it's going. I mean, we've kind of been flying by the seat of our pants along with everyone else. And even Facebook in general, it changes so rapidly. understanding it and watching the direction that it goes sometimes is extremely difficult. So what we do rely on is the mentality of the consumer. Those people, and I'm going to use a phrase, the cream usually comes to the top.
Yep.
They can sort out the good from the bad and the naysayers from the good guys. And, you try to do everything the best you can. And if you're passionate about something like we are about hunting, that comes out and you can't fool someone on a daily basis for the rest of your life. You just can't. So if that passion is within you and it comes out in an honest message and you always have integrity behind you, and that's I think maybe one of the biggest things in our industry is integrity. And there's a lot of good people out there that have been doing it a long time, and we respect and look up to all of those guys. They're the ones, the pioneers that have created and paved the path for all of us. So we continue to try and carry that torch. And as long as you do that, even if you're just starting out and you don't give up, integrity is the thing that will lead you down the finish line.
Sure. In all aspects of life, really.
That's right.
All aspects. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, the business side of it, where do you think hunting's going to look like what it does now, 20 years from now? And if so, what do we need to do to make sure that still happens?
Well, one of the things that we have noticed over the last 5 to 10 years is that a lot of the young potential hunters are involved in sporting events, meaning baseball, basketball, football, soccer, track. And it seems as though now they're more involved than they've ever been. So those tournaments last longer, they travel further. And I've got grandsons that do that. That's how I know it firsthand. But they're never home. I mean, these guys practice every evening, and they're on the weekends, they're in tournaments, and it really does cut into their time. The ones that hunt seem to have to make a choice and say, I'm either going to be in sports or I'm going to be a hunter. And so, I know the parents want them to do well in the sporting activities and all that, because it's just been like sweeping across the country. If you go to one of the events, there's a lot of people there. So it's a good thing in the fact that they're involved in something. And I think that's first and foremost. We love seeing them involved in the sporting events. That's fantastic, because it shows them camaraderie and how to play on a team. And there is no I in team and all those things. Hunting, on the other hand, is a little bit more individualized, where you have to learn and you have to grow up pretty quick if you're trying to do it by yourself. So, it takes mom and dad to get them out there, and we see a lot of that. It seems like we've seen more of that than we used to years ago. And maybe it's because there's just more of it being broadcast, but I love that. We have several team members now that started with us 20, 25 years ago. All of them are bringing their kids up now in the hunting world, and I love that, teaching them the right way, teaching them the ethics behind it and how to be a good sportsman. So that's first and foremost. Where is it going to be at 10 years from now? I think it's still a good thing, because I think there's a lot of parents. I think it'll do quite well, because I think there's a lot of parents that have made up their mind. I'm going to teach my son or my daughter, my niece, my nephew. I'm going to teach them the right way. I want to do the right thing and send a message. Education is first and foremost, making sure that, number one, we understand what the opposing party is thinking and why they're thinking it, and trying to educate those that don't understand it. And I do believe that a lot of firearms naysayers do not understand the love that we have for the sport. It's really hard to convey that, why you would like to go harvest a squirrel or a rabbit and then clean it and then cook it and eat it. And I think consumption helps with that message as well. Sending the right message. We do a piece Taylor does called Killing It in the Kitchen. And she's coming up with these fantastic recipes every day where you look at it and you go, my God, I'd like to have one of those, whether it's a slider or a taco or meatloaf or whatever it may be. So, from field to fork is a good message to send. And, not that you're just out there harvesting just to be harvesting, but you're doing it for a reason.
Right. Man, that's such a good message. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap this thing up. And Terry, I called you an old man in the first because we were, joking around off air, but you've got the enthusiasm. No, you've got the heart and enthusiasm of a young strapping fellow. So I appreciate you spending some time with us, and I'm ready to get out there and try out some of these tactics in October. But I guess for the listener, man, if somebody wants to kind of follow your season, what's the best place to send them?
Well, I tell you what, DeerCast has taken off like wildfire, and we love to continue sending them over there. We have a news feed on DeerCast and DeerCast Now, so they can follow our season very, very easily on DeerCast, as well as DruryOutdoors.com.
Okay.
I can't say enough good things about you guys. You sound like two seasoned veterans. I don't know how old you are, but you really seasoned beyond your years.
Getting older every day, I can tell you that.
I wish you nothing but the best. I hope you both kill a big Mugambi giant this year.
Well, I appreciate it, Terry. Man, I appreciate your time, too, and I hope you get a giant as well this year.
Thanks, guys. I want everybody to be safe. Wear that harness, safety lines. I do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. I had a little tumble a few years ago, but live and learn. And we want to send a message out there to make sure everyone is tied off and has a safety line on.
Yes, sir. We've got. We're glad that you're still on Earth with us, man. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. Too hungry to quit.
That's right. All right,
hey, good luck, guys. I appreciate you.
We'll see you.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Well, there's not a lot of corn around here to hunt, but
there is, just not the standing kind.
yeah, exactly. That's a good point. But there is corn in Iowa, and guess what? I have an Iowa tag, so I'm pretty excited to hear about some pre-rut tactics because I should be up there today hunting a cold front that's massive right now, but I'm not. And luckily, I get to spend some time with my family and that kind of thing. But I will be up there in October, I believe. I think I'm going to go up at the end of this month. And so that's just talking to him and getting the word. Other than the AHD thing that they've got going on up there, like everything's pretty exciting. And it's good to get to learn from him so that I can probably put that into motion. And if we can find any good agriculture as well, I think we can use some of these different tactics and apply them to the hunting there in Kansas as well.
Well, that's one of the good things about actually going up there and hunting public land in Iowa is that there's going to be a deer to hunt. If you had kind of done the whole private thing, maybe got a place, got permission or something, and kind of sold out on this one spot and then had EHD come in, like it would be a pretty sad deal. Now it's like EHD is a sad deal. Either way, it kind of stinks that all these deer are dying. But no pun intended with the stinks part, but at least being a public hunter, like if the deer densities get cut way down, you can still jump around into all these public places and find a deer to hunt.
And I mean, it's pretty centralized, and I think that's why these guys that have places are very worried because if it affects their property, then it affects their property. Now, if it affects XWMA in the very central portion of a unit that I can hunt, then if I go to the eastern unit and hunt eastern part of the unit and hunt a WMA over there, then it might not have affected over there me. So like it doesn't necessarily affect my tag this year as much as it might a Terry Drury who has a property in northern Missouri or wherever that could be like potentially set back a decade from this, what I mean? So
yeah, for sure.
I totally understand it. And the word that we've gotten as far as people concerned with the HD has all been from guys who hunt private pieces up there. So it's definitely an issue that pertains a little bit more to them maybe. But it is a sad issue, even just as an outsider looking in, for sure.
Well, it's sad. Enough of the sadness, though. It's time to get hyped, dude.
Hype.
You're going to kill a freaking giant in October in Iowa. I'm sure we're going to be doing a lot of game planning for that in the upcoming weeks, especially as we get to start looking at like weather patterns and stuff and seeing things. But this week, we actually have our first home front, cold front of the season.
Home field advantage.
It's happening soon, man.
Come on.
And it's almost kind of strange because it's like, what, October 10th or something? No, October 7th and 8th or, I don't know, whatever Monday is.
I don't have a clue what day it is.
Yeah.
Right now. I promise you, I don't know.
Today's Thursday.
Okay,
but next Monday and Tuesday, like we get a pretty good cold front for early October for us here. And we've been kind of game planning for that, looking at some trail camera pictures, kind of evaluating where we can maximize our potential. This time of year, for one thing that we found for sure is that the Shumard oak acorns are some of the first ones to drop, and I feel like you have those and water oaks that are falling, and water oaks will fall all this year and every year. And
when they'll also, since they're falling right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're super preferential because of the tannins. But as they sit, from what I understand, and we get to December or whatever, the tannins start to
deteriorate, and
deteriorate or whatever.
the tannins actually help them like stay viable longer. So they're the only acorn on the ground, where post oak acorns rot pretty quick. But that was kind of my point, is that you got a bunch of water oaks falling right now, but the deer aren't going to hit them like they do the shoemarts, which are a red oak, which you associate with tannins, but they're not very strong, and they're a big payload. I mean, you're talking about like a ping pong ball sized acorn sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to go and try to concentrate on some acorn patterns that we are assuming are existing, and
we
maybe
did a little scouting and found some.
We did. Found some big ones.
We did, yeah. And so that's a potential place that we would like to hunt. But it's also some of these places that we found in the past that have shoemards. We just haven't been in there this year. And I think one issue is like when you go in on a morning hunt first time to somewhere. That is a tough thing to do correctly because you just cannot tell what's a shooting lane and what's not, especially this time of year when there's leaves on everything.
Yeah, we're sitting here in your driveway, and like you've got a cleared area right here, right where the house and stuff is going. And from there, like as soon as you hit the trees, you might have 1 yard that you can actually shoot into the trees. Like there's not a shooting lane to be seen, right? And that's what it's a lot like whenever you go in and sit up in the mornings. Especially whenever you start shining your headlamp, things don't look like what they're supposed to look like. And you're like, oh, there's a lane. And then as soon as it gets light, you're like, oh, that's not. Or you might be like, oh, man, look at all that junk right in the way right there. And then it gets daylight and there's a lane. You're like,
yeah.
But either way, it gets real tough to go and hang and hunt in a place that you've like maybe never really went and looked at that tree before, and you don't want to end up with a 2-yard shot, and that's all you got in the spot. It's kind of worthless. So I think what we're going to do is go to a morning hunt at a place that we know as being a place that's good for early season movement, more of a pinch point, maybe between some food sources and some oak trees around, and then save that place that you're talking about for the evenings.
Yeah, because I think it's going to allow us to walk in there, that evening and see everything before we kind of get into a rush to put everything up in the dark and that kind of thing. And so, and this place that we're going in the morning is going to be a relatively open with some big oaks, which, I mean, if we're sitting in an oak tree, there's a chance we got deer coming to us,
That's right, man. We're going to shake it a little bit when we get up there.
That's right, yeah. It's on accident, but they're post oaks, so we're not 100% sure how it's going to work or how preferential they are right now, how in demand.
Or if we have them on the ground at all.
Yeah, so.
But it's either way, it's a good... Like, we're hunting a deer movement there, too.
Yeah, because you said it was a pinch point.
Yeah.
And we've got a cold front, massive compared to what the weather has been all month.
Last year, there was a scrape line up that tree line.
That's right, yeah.
And
good scrapes.
I think that, especially, after talking to Terry, like, scrapes in October are one of the main things you can key on. And I haven't done that as much throughout the past. I've kind of just chased deer, a lot of times with trail cameras. And I think maybe we need to do that a little bit more because, I mean, one of the big buck killers, of this world is doing it.
Well,
so.
I think the issue for us as well has been finding good scrapes. I mean, just in Texas, like, it's finding scrapes is a tough thing.
You know what's interesting, though, is that if we make them, the deer come.
Sometimes.
So maybe we need to just really...
Rage one.
Yeah, just get after it and make some scrapes, man, and
we do have a spot that we've been making a scrape for like 3 years.
Oh, and the deer love it.
And they do
love it. The coyotes love it. The coons love it. Everything loves
rabbits.
It, man.
Remember
the
that
rabbits.
rabbit?
That's right. I wonder if he's still alive.
I hope so.
But yeah, that'll be a thing we do so that's the Monday plan. And the Monday evening plan, we aren't exactly set on where we want to be, but we know kind of what we want to go do. So we're going to kind of let Monday morning kind of determine that, and then. If we're not tagged out, which we might be, we might very well might be.
Please, sir.
We'll probably hunt Tuesday morning too, and then it's time to get back to work for a few days. But man, this is the time of year to get it. So y'all that are out there listening, if you're able, get out there and hunt because man, we only get hunting season for about 3 months a year.
I know, and we were talking about this a second ago. It's like every year we get to October and we got these plans to go and do and hunt and this and that, and then we get a little bit poorer this time of year for some reason. I think it's just like, prepping for deer season and getting everything back in order and buying tags. And I just went and bought my Texas, all the stuff I needed for Texas.
Did you buy a duck stamp?
I didn't. Man.
I didn't either.
I want to, but, and I know I'll probably go, but I'm just going to wait until the last second.
What is it, 24, $35? Or I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's $30, $35
and
now,
it's like, well, I'll just buy it whenever I actually, because I'm not as much of a duck hunter as you, and I like to go, but I'm not going to like go force it. I'm like, man, I bought one last year, but like, that's like 3/4 of a tank of gas right now.
I know,
you know, like that'll get me somewhere.
I know, and that's where I'm at too. And we always get to this point, and we start going, man, like I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to work. I'm broke. Maybe we're planning wrong in our life. Like maybe we should work harder in August and then we do or something. I don't know, but like it just it's a weird deal. And so I'm just trying to, as I listen to KC say that to you guys, also be inspired to just push on, because this is the October, November, and December are the 3 months, and especially as you on each end of November and in November, that's like we wait all year for this, man. It's like as like a guy who just is eat up with hunting. November is like Super Bowl season. It's what I wait for. My wife understands it, and if yours doesn't, then you probably should just try to convince her over the next few years that, hey, you know how much you like going to like, Target or whatever? Like that's what it's like for me when I go into the woods. So if I can have 1 month, like please just give it to me, but it really is just such a special time. And we wait all year, we talk all year, and we just got to go do it, man.
That's right, man.
You make a good point. As far as things we got going on, the elk video, the first video from the elk hunt, has actually done really well. So thank you guys for the support. Thanks for the comments and the just views and spreading the news, man, sharing it and all that. That means a lot to us. And it's been well received, actually, which is surprising. I thought we'd have some haters with as many views as we've got on it. And we don't have any haters yet, man. They've been real supportive of you, Casey.
Thanks, guys.
So.
We appreciate the support. You probably understand after watching that video that I'm in a very delicate place in my life right now, so I don't need much hate. But if you haven't watched it, go watch that video and let us know what you think about those bulls, man, because that was a pretty awesome experience. Like I've said a couple times, like I'm not just going to be like, well, at least I was there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and there's like a part of me that does say that. Don't get me wrong, but like dadgummit, I should have. There's some things I can learn from that thing for sure, man. But sometimes, man, you got to just admit that you're dealing with a wild animal, and like they aren't just critters in a pen, like these things have got a brain and they're pretty slick.
Yeah, they are, man. So I think it just means that now you're up to bat on shooting a booner this year somewhere. So
man.
You seem real confident.
I never even think about booners, to tell you the truth of the matter.
I don't either, but I just think that what's going to happen.
If it happened, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Texas booner. Ooh, baby.
A tuner.
Okay,
Anyway, yeah. So the rest of that series will be dropping. I think we're going to have 3 parts to that series. Hopefully soon, second part will come out. Not probably near as interesting as the first part, but it's just a part of the story. It'll kind of help you understand how we feel in the last part of the story, part 3, which is a rage fest. And then it's going to be on to hog videos and hopefully some deer videos after next week.
We're going to kill a couple deer between now and then.
Man,
you're shooting a doe Monday morning?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. Are you?
Probably not Monday morning.
Yeah, I don't think I am. I've got a lot of deer tags this year, so I'm kind of almost to the point where like I think does are going to come later in the year for me for sure, which they usually do. But in the past I've shot a doe early season here and there, so
I need some ground meat, man. I might shoot one Monday evening if it's right,
Seems right,
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I hope that we don't have to even make that decision because a big old 10-point with short G4s comes in Monday evening for you.
Man, one brow tine that's a little bit longer than the other on one side. Yeah. I like him. I like it.
He's a pretty good public land buck, I think. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I'm thinking it. I'm thinking it.
Well, cool, man. Well, I hope you guys do get out in it, and I hope that my inspirational talk will inspire me to get out in it as well. If not, if it doesn't do that for you. So anyway, God bless you guys. Have a great October, and we'll see you next week. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.